All right. Hi, everyone. This is Rachel Faxer from ECDC's Reception and Placement Program. And I'm happy to have with us today presenters from Tapestri Inc., an organization that is dedicated to ending violence and oppression in refugee and immigrant communities using culturally competent and appropriate methods. Our webinar will be focused on domestic violence. As refugee service providers and advocates, we want to ensure that refugees are protected, know their rights, and know who to turn to for help. We also want to make sure that caseworkers are not only able to help their refugee clients, but able to protect themselves while dealing with domestic violence issues. This topic is no doubt difficult to bring up with clients. However, this is an important topic that ECDC and PRM expect you to cover. So we present to you a webinar in two parts. The first will be an overview of domestic violence in the refugee community and safety for clients and caseworkers. The second will address strategies you can use to overcome barriers to talking about this subject with your clients. If you have questions, please feel free to type them in at any time. We will take a break after the first part to address questions and again at the end. So now I'm going to turn it over to Limia Obadi, a legal advocate with Tapestri Inc. So thank you so much, Limia, for being here, and I'm going to put myself on mute, so it's on you.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Hi, my name is Limia, and I'm the legal advocate at Tapestri. Tapestri is a nonprofit organization, and we work with victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. What we would cover today would be, we talk about domestic violence, and we talk about domestic violence and how it pertains when we're working with immigrants and refugees. So in the first part, we would cover about Tapestri, what is domestic violence, how do we work with immigrants and refugees. We talk about safety planning for victims. We talk about safety planning for case managers. And we put in a few recommendations for caseworkers. And then we can take some of the questions. Like Rachel said, if you have any question, please just type it in the question chat box, and we can address them once we finish with the presentation. All right. Like I said, Tapestri is located in Metro Atlanta, and we work with the refugee and immigrant communities using culturally competent and appropriate methods to overcome domestic violence, human trafficking, and to end oppression as well. We do a lot of trainings. We do multicultural trainings for law enforcement, court personnel, and other agencies and resettlement agencies as well. My role at Tapestri as a legal advocate or a domestic violence program coordinator would be, we provide direct services to victims of domestic violence. We help them with housing, daycare, we do job assistance. We also help them obtain protective orders, and we refer them for other services for divorce, child support, child custody cases, and immigration assistance as well. We also do provide community awareness and sensitivity trainings. We do domestic violence and healthy relationship to a lot of refugee resettlement agencies during their cultural orientation week. Like I said, domestic violence have different faces, and we see clients with a lot of issues, and sometimes when they're refugees and they relocate to the U.S., they have this expression, might be, are they just confused, are they depressed, or are they abused? So there's a thin line between all those, so we can only assume, but if we talk about the options and talk to the client more, then we would have more information on what they're going through. I'm sure you see a lot of those people during the first few months of their relocation. So what is domestic violence? It would be a violence between a husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, whether they live together or not, would be same-sex partners, would be relatives, parents, and those children may be living in the same house. Sometimes they have extended family, like the mother, the father, and then they might have the in-laws living with them as well. The violence is mostly physical, but it can also be threats. It might be isolation, harassment. It might be emotional mistreatment, forcing them to have sex, or making threats with regards to having to take away the kids, or threatening their family back home. What do we do to screen for domestic violence? We can't just ask anybody if they're going through domestic violence, especially for new refugees that just relocated to the U.S., because most of them might not have, in their culture, they might not know what domestic violence is. So we need to go deeper than that when we talk to them. So a few questions to ask for screening might be, does your partner hit you, push you, yell at you, kick you, or use objects to intimidate you? Does he isolate you from your family and friends? Does he threaten to take your children away from you? Does he use immigration to control you? Does he threaten to, send you back home? We know he doesn't have that access, but it might be something he can use. And most of the time, families, they do. I'm not really familiar with the refugee process, but I know from a few clients that I had, it might be the husband that applies, but then he might include the wife and the family. So he might feel like he's entitled to take that away from them because he's the primary applicant or something like that. And do you have access to your documents or bank accounts, or does he have all of it? So these are a few questions that we can ask. There are a few myths about domestic violence that the myth might be it affects only a small percentage of the population. That's wrong. 1 in every 4 women go through intimate partner violence in their lives, and approximately 85% of the victims are women, and 15% approximately for men. There are up to 3 million people who are physically abused by their husband or boyfriend per year. 3 million. And on average, there are more than 3 women and 1 man that are murdered by their husbands or boyfriend. So that's a lot. That's a big number. The other myth would be domestic violence occurs in only low-income, uneducated, and minority population. That's also a myth. It's a fact that it occurs in all types of families, regardless of income or profession, or their ethnicity or educational background or race. Maybe there might be a lot more low-income people that are overrepresented in calls to the police or the shelters or social services because they don't have any other resources except to utilize the resources that are available. So that might be a misconstrued number, but it might be true. Alcohol causes domestic violence. That's a no-no. Maybe it enhances, but there might be a correlation between alcohol and domestic violence, but the batterer tends to use alcohol as an excuse most of the time, and the victim sometimes uses that as well. It's because, he just gets violent when he's drinking or he's drunk, so he gets violent, or he might get high, but that's no excuse. That's not related. I mean, he might like to use that, but it's not because he drinks that he gets violent. Domestic violence is a pattern, so it's just about control. Domestic violence incidents are isolated. No, domestic violence is a pattern of coercive behavior aimed at gaining or maintaining power and control over the other partner. And the pattern is often described as a cycle, but usually it escalates through time. This is what's called the power and control wheel. This is mostly used for, it's called the mainstream because we have another one for immigrant women. It's mostly the same, It's mostly showing how the victim feels controlled by the abuser, and these are some of the things he might use to control her. It's usually the same, but for the immigrant women, they might have um, uh, more tactics they use. Here it's using intimidation, would be emotional abuse, using isolation, minimizing and denying or blaming, using the children, using male privilege, and using economic abuse. This is mostly for mainstream, um, but for immigrant and refugee women, this is a power and control wheel. Using sex, calling her a prostitute, a mail order bride, racism, mocking her, using documentation, like hiding her documents, isolation, using laws and regulations. I mean, if the abuser might lie to her about the police, the laws, and the court system in the U.S., he might use employment as a way of controlling her, meaning not allowing her or preventing her from obtaining or getting work, using children and family. These are a few things that abusers use to control immigrant women. So working with victims within the immigrant community, there are a few things we need to focus on. Mainly, we need to be aware of the cultural views, such as what in that culture, what's the right of a woman? How is a woman viewed in that society or in that community or in that culture? What's the religious views on marriage? What's the religious views on divorce? Barriers. What are the barriers? Economic, cultural, legal, language, um, and others. So these are the few things that we need to focus on when we work with victims of domestic violence. So when we work with victims, we need to look at the safety planning for victims. We need to look at the safety planning for case managers who do home visits. And we need to look at the victims' rights. What are their legal consequences? How do they get protective orders? And also look at other resources that we can work with. Safety planning for victims. I know as case managers, you get to work with both. If there is domestic violence, you get to work with both the abuser and the victim. So it's hard for you to get an unbiased view because you get to see both of them there. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, because if you see how they carry themselves in front of you, you can see sometimes if he is controlling. You can see in the way that in their body languages or the way they communicate with you guys how one is controlling or how the client might act towards the abuser. But again, you might not even be able to talk to her by herself because they always come together. So it might be hard for you to schedule an appointment to just discuss anything about domestic violence or if she has issues. As case managers, there are a few things you can go over to know about the basic relationship and safety planning with potential victims. You ask them during an argument, or if you feel tension building, you need to avoid areas in your home, like the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom, or any workshop where he might have access to things that he can use to hurt her. If there are weapons in your household, such as firearms, you need to lock them up or you need to hide them. Or you need to know where there's a safe exit from your house, a window, elevator, or a stairwell. Discuss the issue with your case manager. There are various services available for you as well as the abuser. So you need to tell them these are the resources. You can discuss cases, if you have any issues, you can discuss them with me. And then I can help you, maybe refer you to a different agency. There might be help for you and classes for the abuser as well. Discuss the situation with a trusted neighbor. If you feel like you're in danger, you need to talk to a neighbor. That way, if they hear something, they would call 911. Always keep a packed bag ready just in case. Call 911 immediately. And sometimes there are safety planning handouts where you can give those out to the clients. That's for the client, but for you as case managers, you also need to have safety planning because you don't want to put yourself in danger as well. I know you're there to help and support the family, but you need to be aware of the dangers around you and try to protect yourself as well. Always approach in an understanding and non-blaming way. That way the victim would be open to discuss if she has any issues. Acknowledge that it's scary, might be difficult to talk about domestic violence, but we have to make sure that we're not putting it in a judgmental tone or take very a role where we feel like they have to do what we tell them to do. So we have to acknowledge and talk to them and say, okay, that's a scary thing to talk about. It's difficult. They read in all culture everywhere. So we need to help them be able to talk to you guys. Share if there's a warning list. Share about the violence and the non-violence will, about how a relationship is supposed to be. Support, be a good listener. Let them express their emotions. Ask if there's any physical harm, and ask them if they want to report to police if they have went through anything like that. And mostly you need to provide them with information about the resources available for battered women, like shelters and other agencies that might be able to help them. I know most refugee agencies might not have the time or the resources to address domestic violence and help to provide direct services, but there are other resources within the community that might be able to help them. So providing that information during orientation is vital. Inform them about the legal protection and services for protective order, child support, custody. Information is vital. They need to know what's out there. And then plan for a safe strategy for living the abusive relationship. You can talk to them about, okay, if this is not working and if you're in this kind of situation, we can help you. Maybe we can, get you out of the house. It's just the first few weeks or the first month since you came in, so we can help you move to a different location or whatever you can do within your reach to help them get to a safe place. Home visits and how to address domestic violence. Like I said, you guys might have a good and a positive and a negative relationship with a victim that goes through domestic violence. The cons would be the comfort level with how to initiate conversation with the clients. They might be stressed out working, or you might be stressed out working with the clients. You might always be like, okay, what if this happens when I'm at home, or stuff like that. And you might be also concerned about your personal safety. What if the domestic violence escalates while you're there with the client, and you don't want to put yourself in danger. And this might reduce the effectiveness of your home visit as well. You might be really stressed out and concerned about all the violence that might happen, that you might not really focus on what you're there to help them with. But then you might have a unique opportunity to observe the relationship dynamic. You can go home and see, okay, how they're living, how do they react to each other? Does he give her the opportunity to make decisions? Does he control her? Is she able to do things on her own? Does she have access to the food stamp cards? Does she have access to her documents? You can see all that. How are the kids' relationship with the father, or whoever is the abuser? And then you have the advantage of contacting the victims who have no access to other resources. You might be their only line of support. They might not have access to talk to anybody, but the abuser cannot deny her access to your office or the case manager, because he knows you guys are out there to help to help the family as a whole. So you might be their only resource available. So you need to make use of that. So for personal safety, for the home visit, if that's really a concern, you need to meet the client at the office if you feel like the situation is not safe. You have to establish check-in times with the home office. That way, if you're out, then you have somebody from the office that checks on you, or you check in or be like, okay, if I don't call you at this time, then you need to, call me or check on me. I'm going to this place to check on this family. Park your car in front, park with the front of your car pointed towards the exit. That way you can just run out and get into the car and drive. You need to observe and listen before entering the house. Do not enter the house until you see the client at the door, making sure that she's safe and it's safe for you to go in as well. Make sure you position yourself near the door or the exit and set emergency numbers on auto dial. These are just precautions that you can use when you do home visits. The victim's rights. There's a lot of times there are victim compensations. I know it differs from state to state, but I'm not sure how it works for the different states that you're in. But if you're a victim of the crime, then the state would do. There are forms that you fill out to get compensation for time lost, medical bills, and stuff like that. You can express statement to the court regarding the case if the abuser has been arrested or is in the court system. You need to be aware of the court process. The victim can pull in information and they give them updates on what's happening with the abuser. Most courts, they have to have, if they have federal grants, they have to have language access or interpreters for domestic violence cases, especially in protective order cases. Protective hearing and court proceedings are usually free, and you can request an interpreter. Agencies receiving, like I said, federal funding should have that already. So if most courts do get federal funding, so if they have federal funding, they are supposed to provide an interpreter for protective orders or restraining orders. The legal consequences on the batterer or the family, this is something that you can also talk to them about. Might be legal fees, expensive legal fees, like, for rent, to rent another place for the family. The children might be at risk of being taken away. DFCS, DFCS is the Department for Family and Child Services in Georgia, so it might be different for the different states, but this is the Department for Family and Children Services. If there's violence and, it has been escalated in front of the kids and stuff, the state would take the children away. There would be issues of custody and support. There'll be divorce, order of protection. It's a lot of legal fees and processes. For the batterer, he might go to jail. He has to pay bail money. He would have a criminal record if it's an assault. It might affect his immigration status. The family's going to be separated, and there would be, divorce and protective order for him not to see his family for a few months or a year. What is a protective order? Protective order is something you can file at the courthouse. I'm sure most of you might know about it, but it's called protective order or a restraining order in different states. When you do file that one, you can include multiple family members and not just abuser, meaning if there are in-laws or other families living in the house or community members who've been threatening the victim, so you can add all those family members. Because in most of those immigrant cultures, extended family having in the same house is normal. And you can use this to help victims get their immigration documentation, meaning if they just arrived, they might just have the work permit. But then if he has the work permit, her social, and all the other documents, then she wouldn't be able to file for her green card eventually or go find work. So we can use that protective order to get those documents back from him, maybe the food stamp card or other documents that he might be holding, her passport, the kids' birth certificates, and stuff like that. And we can also address issues of custody, visitation, and kidnapping in there. We might get supervised visitation if she's scared of he might be taking the kids away and kidnapping them. We put in child support because divorce is going to take a long time if that's the long-term plan. But child support within TPO with protective orders help you get relief much faster within a few months. And then partnering with local service providers, meaning you have to have local allies. You need to know what type of services they offer so that, your services, the services that they provide might be appropriate for your clients, meaning if you have other domestic violence centers, shelters, or others that are within your community, you need to know and make them allies. That way they can provide those services that would supplement what you're doing. Providing training and information for other social providers who may not know about domestic violence in the immigrant community. There might be other providers, but they might not be aware of things or the different issues that immigrants that go through domestic violence face. So you can provide that information or give them a one-on-one on where that person is from and provide trainings if needed. Recommendations for caseworkers it's important to implement policies to maintain a secure and violence-free work environment. You need to develop plans for how to respond to domestic violence issues when you come across one beforehand. That way you know what to do. You need to include 3 or 4 basic questions about relationship during client intake or orientation. We work with a few refugee resettlement agencies, and they seem to acknowledge that this helps because they need to know from the beginning if there are any issues that they need to look out for from the family. If you're suspicious about family violence with clients, refer the abuser for the FIP is the Family Violence Intervention Program, where the abuser goes and takes classes that helps him become nonviolent, meaning he takes classes, the family violence classes help batterers or abusers learn how to handle violence and not to handle violence and how to handle arguments and stuff like that. So it might be helpful. They can volunteer for those classes if you see them, if you see a potential abuser in them. Tapestri does community training education on healthy relationship and domestic violence. We can help out. We can provide those trainings for those refugee agencies that have the first few weeks of orientation. Always discuss issues with victims separately and away from the abuser. You don't want to start talking about relationship and other issues in front of the abuser because that might trigger something and he might say, oh, you're trying to discuss or you told them something, so that's why they're asking, so you don't want to put her in danger. If you're not comfortable discussing the issue, always refer to the Tapestri or DV center. So if it's an issue that you're not comfortable dealing with, then you can always have somebody else come out and do an overall general presentation or training, or bring that somebody and they can talk to that client individually. These are some of the national resources. All right. So this concludes our first section. Let's see if you have any questions, and I'm gonna let Rachel talk. All right, there's one question. Rachel, can you see the question, or do you want me to read it out?
I cannot see questions, so feel free to just read them out and then answer them, and if you need me, just let me know.
All right, okay. What are the 3 basic questions about the relationship during client intake or orientation? These questions might be that's your like the first screening questions that we had at the beginning of the webinar. Let me show. You can choose any of those questions, but it's mostly knowing about the relationship dynamic in the family. Can you see the screen? These questions might be, does he hit you? Does he push you? Does he yell at you? Does he use objects to intimidate you? Does he let you make decisions? Does he allow you to do things? How has your relationship been with him and his family? Do you feel like you know your husband, or do you feel like sometimes you're scared that he might come in and do something, unpredictable? Does he use alcohol? Does he use drugs? Do you have access to documents like bank accounts? Do you have access to your documents like your passport and other things? Does he isolate you from your family and friends? Does he threaten to take your children away from you? Does he make you feel bad? Does he always put you down? Does he say words that are demeaning to make you feel bad about yourself? There are a few things that there are a lot of questions that you can use, but you can pick one, or you can pick 3 or 4 questions that fit into your program. Let's see. Did I answer that question for you? All right. All right. Do we have any other questions? All right. All right. Should we go ahead and start the next session, or do you want a few minutes before we jump to that one? All right. We go ahead to section 2. Okay, so section 2 would be addressing domestic violence during cultural orientation. All right. So when we work with victims within the immigrant community, like I said, we need to have knowledge of the cultural views on the issues that we're addressing. We need to look at the views on marriage, divorce, and other barriers that they have. Understanding culture, what is that? There are many languages. Different languages have hundreds of dialects, many religions. There are no one cookbook approach to dealing with different communities. And now with our refugee community, we have people coming from all over the world, and it's kind of hard to say we know about all cultures, because we might not know about all the different cultures that we're working with. And the culture is always changing, and it's affected by many factors like the family, the region, etc., and how they came to the U.S. And abusers might manipulate the system and use their culture as a way to manipulate the courts, the judges, attorneys, and law enforcement as well. While we cannot know everything about all the cultures, we might have resources in our community, or we might have the internet, and we can Google and find out what's going on, or to learn about the different cultures and communities that we're working with. The main thing we need to look at would be also when we see abusers manipulate the system. It's like maybe the husband I'm using the man most of the time because 85–90% of the time the abuser is a male, so I'm gonna be using the man as the abuser. It doesn't mean that there are no women abusers. There are, but just for this training sake, I'm gonna use the man as an abuser. So there might be a culture where the man would be like, oh, okay, this is the court, and you don't speak English. I do, and I'm the man, so I'm gonna be the one talking. You can't do anything. Even if you go report, nobody's gonna listen to you because you don't speak English. Nobody's gonna understand you, or nobody's gonna believe your story. There are a lot of barriers that affect the victims in the immigrant communities, and the first one is the economic barrier. They might be dependent on the husband. Usually the husband might be the one working, so the wife might be at home taking care of the kids or is not working. Or the wife might have a job, but it's low paying with no benefits or job security. So it's kind of, because she might not have the skills to get a job like the husband, so that job might not be enough for her to be self-sufficient. But she might not be eligible for public assistance too, because if she's like, okay, she's working, it's not a low paying job, but then the husband is making money, so they might be out of that phase where they're being helped by the resettlement agency and they're on their own right now. But then if they get through divorce or domestic violence, you can go and apply for assistance for public benefits, because the husband's income is going to show up and she might not be eligible, so that might be a problem. She might be helping her family back home. She might be sending in money to help and support the family back home, like her mother or other siblings. And she might be scared to report the abuse because she might think that he might get arrested or deported, and then she would be with no support. So she's like, okay, if he gets arrested, who's going to support me and my kids? So that would be a reason for her not to report. Other barriers would be the culture barrier, meaning, like I said, the community might ostracize her if she leaves her partner or she talks about domestic violence. Because most cultures, they feel like, oh no, we can't talk about that, it's a family thing, and if you go ahead and talk about it to different people outside of the community, then that would make you, the community might abandon you or ostracize you, saying, oh, you're not a good wife, or you're not a good person. Her culture might find it acceptable for a husband to beat his wife and for her to endure it. There are some cultures that be like, oh, okay, it's fine, a husband can beat a wife to some extent, but it's normal. So I did a training a couple of years ago to some, where were they? I think they were from Bhutan or Nepal. So we're talking about domestic violence, and I'm like, okay, so what is domestic violence? Tell me, what is domestic violence? There's like, domestic violence is like beating up the wife, and she's all bloody, and then pulling her out of the house from her legs, and to putting her in the street. That is domestic violence. I mean, that's extreme, but they feel like that is domestic violence. But just the violence that happens in the house, the pushing, the yelling, the threatening, the hitting was okay for them. That was not domestic violence in their eyes. I'm just trying to tell you that some people have views that domestic violence is, when it's extreme, that you had to go to the doctor, you had to be pulled out from your legs and stuff like that. So different cultures, maybe different communities have different ways of viewing domestic violence. And sometimes they want to protect the spouse standing in the community. He might be a community leader. He might have a good place in the community. He's well respected. People listen to him. He's like a mentor. So even if she comes out and talks about domestic violence, they might not be helping her. So they might be. She might need to protect his standing in the community. And there are cultural norms concerning a woman's place, like her role in the family expectation. So the family expects her to take care of the family, take care of the husband if he's abusive. They're like, oh, it's just up to you. You need to calm him down. You need to make him feel at home. Don't get him. What did you do to make him get violent? So there are a few cultural barriers which imposes a lot on the victim to be a victim as her role in the family. If it's in a same-sex relationship, they might be scared of being outed. So the culture in there might be, oh no, we can't talk about it. So if we say there's something going on, then they're scared that people would know about their relationship. And they might also be responsible to their siblings, saying that if she calls the police or if she gets divorced, that might scare off her siblings from potential suitors. Like I had Indian client that was scared of calling the police or talking about domestic violence or getting a protective order because he's like, oh, if I call or if I talk about it or if I report it, then my family is going to be stigmatized. I have a few sisters younger than me, so if I do that, then, most arranged marriages come because, looking at the family and stuff like that. So she said it would look bad on my family, and my sisters might not have potential suitors. Nobody's going to marry them because I did this. They're going to claim that I'm not a good person and ostracize my family. So that's also some of the things that come up as cultural barriers too. Legal barriers may have a distrust in the legal system that originated from her own experience in her country of origin. Most of the refugees come from war-torn places where there's no stable situation. The policing system, law enforcement are corrupt. So if they call the police, they might not help them. So they would feel like if they do it here, it would be the same thing. Police might not be able to help them out, or there might not be any legal system that would help them, the courts or police. So they're scared of calling from their own experiences back home. Might not be a good one, but so we need to let them know about their options and the resources and how police can help them out. They might have difficulty understanding the U.S. legal system. I mean, everybody has a lot of difficulty understanding the U.S. legal system, but we need to make sure, explain to them that this is what the procedures are. If you call the police, they might help you out. You have resources. You have ways of dealing with it. You can apply for a protective order. You go to court and file paperwork and stuff like that. And the belief that the judiciary does not function independently from the government. So they feel like the courts wouldn't help them, just like back home. It might be the court and the legal system are one and the same. So they're like, oh, if the police is not going to help me, the courts are not going to help you, definitely, with divorce or with protective orders. Expectation that people with money, U.S. citizenship, or ties with the government will prevail in court. There might be people that are here as refugees for working with the government back in their home country for doing various things, mostly interpretation or other services. So once they come here and they get violent, they'll be like, oh no, I have a connection with the government, this and this is my friend. So if you call, nobody's going to help you because I have those connections and ties with the government. Nobody's going to believe you. Believe that undocumented immigrants would be denied access to legal services or will not be treated fairly. This might not apply for refugees, but they have that impression where, if we look at it, the refugees might be, oh, I have the documents, you don't, so, I have more priority over you. They're going to listen to me. They're going to believe me and not you. You're not going to get treated fairly, or you're going to be denied services. Language barriers would be there are limited access to shelters, police, and court services because of lack of bilingual professionals who can provide services. So most of those refugees might be scared of going anywhere because they might not understand or speak English, and there might not be anybody that speaks their languages. They might be, there might be in a state where they don't have a community that's out there to help or provide culturally competent services. So they're scared of calling the police. they might not feel comfortable seeking or using services. Like I said, if they're not able to understand or communicate properly, then there's no use calling because they're going to be misunderstood and misrepresented, or they might not get the services that they need, which might create frustrations as well. And the assumption that because she speaks English, she's able to navigate the U.S. system. So if some of the clients, they do speak English to some level, they might be, they might they might assume that, oh, she's able to use the U.S., she might navigate resources and get help on her own. Then the fear of deportation as a barrier. That's the biggest concern, because the batterer might just keep giving them misleading information, saying, oh, if you do that, then you're going to get deported because, I have the documents, you don't, or we're going to get, both of us going to get deported. It makes it difficult to access a variety of services, including law enforcement. Keeps them from disclosing information to anyone because most of them believe, like, if they do call the police or stuff like that, the abuser might be deported or his immigration status taken away from him. Sometimes just because they don't work or they don't have the financial ability to take care of the kids, the abuser might keep telling them, oh, I'm the one making money, I'm the one, renting and everything, and it's my name. So if you call, then I'm going to be taking the kids away from you, and the kids are going to be with me. In some states, HB 87 is in Georgia, but some states, they have different rules that show that give state police and other law enforcement the ability to check immigration status or get them arrested and stuff like that. So that might also be a big fear for deportation. Fear that they will be forced to go back to their home country where there may be no protection or social services for her or her children, because the children might be U.S. citizens, and they might have special needs that cannot be met in her country. So they're scared of that as well. These are a few key things to address domestic violence in the immigrant community. I got this from the National Resource Center on Violence Against Women. This is more like empowering the victims. Access to broad skill development training. Survivors may have different skill sets that those need in the U.S. to access services and earn an income, like English languages, driving, and other things. Providing access to information, knowledge of knowing that domestic violence is a social problem and there are legal protections and services available and how to access them. Assistance in accessing services. The services in the survivor's local language, like I said, if staying with their abuser, culturally appropriate plans for protecting the survivor and their children from violence. And also providing culturally specific batterer intervention. This is the family violence classes I was talking about earlier. They would engage abusive partners in dialogues about culturally specific practices that promote violence, and those that call for respecting women. Be supportive of social networks, like engaging the family, the friends, the communities, about safety planning and how to view domestic violence, and having the community members talk about prevention. Most of the time, the resettlement in a new culture can cause stress and tension, which happens with a lot of the refugee families. And so this disrupts the traditional family roles in this new environment where they're in, because back home might be the wife was at home and he was the main breadwinner, he works and stuff like that. But now when they come out here, there might be a lot of options for skills that the wife has, and the husband might have a hard time finding jobs. That would create tension, that would create, stress. If he might feel like he's not functioning well as a husband, because some of them might have this idea that a husband, a father should be the main provider and he should be making more money and stuff like that. So all this in a new environment, new culture might cause stress and tension within the family. Then they might have them support groups, have support groups for survivors from different cultures, where it would be a forum for the survivors to reflect and share their experiences, to know that DV is not only in their culture, and how to acknowledge that, and how to share and get services and help for that kind of relationship that they have in their family. Mostly collaboration with other agencies. Domestic violence services that serve specific immigrant groups may not be present in all regions. So interagency coordination and collaboration is crucial to increase those culturally competent services to immigrant women. I mean, here in Georgia, we have a lot of resettlement agencies like the IRC, Lutheran Services, RISA becomes, what is it, New American Pathway. We have a lot of resettlement agencies, but we also have other agencies like Tapestri. Tapestri works with all immigrants and refugees, but when we have Raksha, who works with South Asian communities, and then we have CPAC works with Asian communities and Pacific Islanders, where they work with a lot of other victims. So we have different services, and then we have Camino Latino, we work with the Latin population, and we have other services. So there are a lot of other culturally competent and specific services that work with immigrant population. So we need to have our networks out there and be able to bring in all those players, so that we can address the whole issue. It's just not one thing. So we can have all that trainings or information, either for just the staff members, or even to have all the clients get services. What are the best practices in addressing domestic violence in the immigrant community, mostly with refugees? If you have, I know you guys have a lot of trainings, employment training, life skills, and all that stuff, cultural orientation during the first few months. So that's a good way of having all those groups in, all those clients in there. So if possible, when you have trainings, have separate groups for men and women, and have trainings under healthy relationship rather than domestic violence, because we don't want to put in domestic violence that would make the men, or they might feel like that we're pointing fingers at them. So it's like, okay, this is a healthy relationship training. It's not domestic violence, and we address the different issues that lead to violence. And then we encourage the group to participate, maybe by talking about commonalities, such as marriage, kids, and stuff. We want to have this discussion, this training, not as a training, but as a discussion group. That way, we open it for discussion, and we have everybody put in their input. We just don't want to talk about them, tell them, oh, this is what you need to do, this is domestic violence, you call, you do this, you do that. We don't want to give them steps. We want to have a group that participates, meaning talking about common things that we have: marriage, or kids, life in America, how is back home, where are you from, talk about your culture, talk about your family, and stuff like that. We need to have that kind of relationship with those clients in order for them to be forthcoming. We can ask as an icebreaker, we can ask the group if they have a word for domestic violence. Most cultures don't have a word, so this can be something that you can use as an icebreaker. You'd be like, okay, do you have a word for domestic violence? Do you know what domestic violence is? They might have a word, or they might want to explain what domestic violence is. So you get to understand their views on domestic violence, and get their ideas on what they think is domestic violence. It might not be the same thing or throughout different cultures, but we need to understand where they're coming from in order for us to explain to them what domestic violence is and what domestic violence is in the U.S. And then we can provide examples about ourselves, maybe how you communicate with a partner, how you address miscommunication in the household. There's something called the conscious communication. So if you want, you can put out that one and be like, when you talk to a partner, when you talk to your kids, your coworkers, or whatever, how you don't want them to assume, and how to have a good communication skills. That might be also a training that you might want to do, or just bring it up in those trainings that you have. And then open the discussion for the group to make comments or ask questions. Try not to be judgmental and be open to different views and cultures. Be like, oh, learn from them. Try to make time to learn or read about their culture and traditions, even before the training. That might be interesting. They might feel really appreciated or respected, or I don't know, it might give them like, they might feel good about it. You go, you learn something about a culture. If you know that you're gonna meet with a group from specific country, oh, you go read about something that's unique about that culture and be like, oh, okay, so what about this? Tell me more about this. I know about this. This is how much I know. Enlighten me. Tell me. I'm interested. Get them to feel like they're respected and you're open to their views and cultures. Ask about their cultures, their way of life. The people you are presenting for. Try to have relationship kind of thing. And because you might be working with these people for some time, when they come in until like a few months from now to like 6 months or something, indicate that there is no superior or inferior culture. We should not be judgmental. Like, okay, oh, you feel this good, you feel good about this part of your culture, but do you feel the same about this one? Why not? And stuff like that. Every culture is not 100% perfect, so there's always negative and positive thing, and we need to address that one. And then we need to talk to them about how to integrate all that in their new culture in the U.S. with their new, with their new setup of family functions and stuff like that. Again, this is just the national resources. Okay, pretty good. 1:30. All right. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Do you have any questions? Let's see. We have a few. Okay. Most of the time, cultural orientation provided to each family one-on-one, not in groups. So how would you recommend bringing up this topic in terms of educating about what TV is in this country when it is so husband and wife together without others present? At each family. Okay, my understanding, sorry, you different culture orientation was for a group, but if it's in your setting, it's only for husband and wife. We definitely don't want to talk about domestic violence. I mean, we can talk about domestic violence and say domestic violence is illegal in the U.S. You get arrested, it's going to be a crime against you, especially if you get physically violent. But then you can say that, okay, these are the consequences of domestic violence. This is what's going to happen to you. You might get arrested, and there's also, you can bring out, okay, there's also protective orders and stuff like that for victims, and there are services that other organizations can provide. But domestic violence is illegal. Overall, you just need to make sure that he understands, the husband, that there are consequences for domestic violence, and there are services and options here, unlike other countries. Maybe you want to bring up different countries where they're from, but you'll be like, okay, if you do this, this is going to happen. You're going to get arrested. There are court proceedings. You call 911, you get arrested, and that's it. Do you explain?
Yeah, Linnea, I would add to that as well. The ECDC orientation guide does have a brief script that you can say to, whether it's a group or individuals, but it's sounding like from what Linnea is saying that if it's, with individuals or just a husband and a wife, that you just want to just go over the facts. And we do have that guidance in the script. And, if you wanted to further develop that knowledge for your clients, then, maybe think about doing a separate healthy relationship seminar, where you invite other clients, new arrivals or non-new arrivals, and talk more about the subject in more depth.
And she's asking if you need to explain what constitutes domestic violence. Definitely, because some of them, like I said, might not be aware that what they're doing is domestic violence, and they might not know it's a crime in the U.S. So they need to know. Knowing is different from doing something without knowing. So if they do it after they know that it's illegal and it's a crime, then they're going to take up the consequences. Okay. Let me see. Do I have another question? No. All right. Do we have any other questions, or do you want to add anything, Rachel? Is there anything you want to add?
I don't see any questions on my end. I think we can end it there. I know our folks are pretty busy with a lot of arrivals this month. So if you do have any other questions, feel free to send them to me. I think the best practices that Lamia showed us, that was really great. And it's almost a skeleton for, you know, a lesson plan. So I'll try to work something out on that so we can get some more specific guidance, you know, so we can talk about domestic violence with our clients in the best way possible. So thank you so much again, Linnea. This was very comprehensive. So again, feel free to give us a call, give me a call, or send me an email if you have further questions. So I hope you all have a great day, and thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure presenting. Let me know if you have any questions, or send it to Rachel. Same thing, you have my contact information, and I can have this PowerPoint available to you guys through Rachel as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.